Beloved, in our 4 sermons on Philippians 4, we consider the triad peace, contentment, and joy. Though you're familiar with faith, hope, and charity, here's another 3. The way of peace is, according to verses 6 through 9, the way of praying, letting all our anxieties be known to God, verse 6. The way of thinking of spiritual and divine things, verse 8. And the way of obedience to God, following Paul's teaching and example, verse 9. After a sermon on peace, as opposed to worrying, we had last week 2 sermons on Philippians 4 verse 11, the second half, which dealt with contentment, from peace to contentment. We considered the meaning of contentment, that it is satisfaction with the living God, inwardly by faith, apart from external circumstances. We saw the range of contentment, in whatsoever state I am, contentment, everywhere in all things, contentment, to use phrases from verses 11 and 12. And then we considered the difficult lesson, the learning of contentment, that it comes with time, experience, and effort. That whatever attainment we have reached has come with time, experience, and effort. With time, experience, and effort alongside the activity of faith as appropriating the truth of God's Word concerning His gracious care for us. This evening we're turning from peace and contentment to joy. This epistle to the Philippians mentions joy and rejoicing in various forms some 17 times in just 4 chapters. Philippians could be called the great epistle of joy. And there's a nice quote in your bulletin setting that forth. In Philippians 1 verse 4, Paul talks about praying with joy. Praying for the Philippians with joy at the remembrance of the fellowship he had with them. In chapter 1 verse 18, Paul says that he rejoices in people preaching Christ. Yea, he resolves to rejoice in the preaching of Christ. In chapter 1 verses 25 and 26, Paul's proposed return to them will cause rejoicing to abound, a joy which comes out of faith. Moving to chapter 2 verse 2, it's true church unity which fills up Paul's joy, and indeed the joy of all office bearers. In chapter 2 verses 16 and 17, Paul speaks of his joy in the Philippians on the judgment day, that he's going to rejoice that they will be there as the fruit of his labours, and he rejoices in them now. In chapter 2 verse 18 he says, and you also rejoice in me, reciprocal joy. In chapter 2 verse 28, the Philippians rejoice in seeing Epaphroditus, one of their own, recover from his illness, and the poor man had nearly died. Chapter 3 verse 1 calls the church to rejoice in the Lord. In chapter 4 verse 1, Paul calls this church my joy and crown. Then we have perhaps the most famous word of joy in this epistle, in chapter 4 verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say, rejoice. A lot of rejoicing there. Rejoicing in the saints, rejoicing in the Lord, rejoicing in praying, rejoicing in fellowshipping, rejoicing in church unity, rejoicing in preaching. Now, what about our text this evening? What about that part of our text which mentions rejoicing? That is the very beginning of the text. Chapter 4, verse 10, "But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly." Here's rejoicing. It's rejoicing in the Lord. It's rejoicing greatly. This is the only one of the 17 references to joy and rejoicing in this epistle where there's great rejoicing. And it is the last use of joy or rejoice in this epistle. So what's the occasion of Paul's great joy in this epistle? The answer, in short, is that the occasion involves a gift. A gift from the Philippians to Paul in Rome, under house arrest, to Paul through Epaphroditus. That's mentioned in chapter 4, verse 18. Let's consider then together Paul's great joy and the Philippians' gift. Paul's great joy and the Philippians' gift. The gift and Paul's needs, that first. The gift and the Philippians' fruit, that second. And the gift and God's approval. Paul's great joy and the Philippians' gift. Relating the gift first to the needs of Paul, the fruit of the Philippians, the approval of God. Now we might expect, or we might have expected, that Paul's joy at receiving this gift from the Philippians would be because this gift was just what he needed. As I mentioned last Lord's Day, we're not told the form or nature that this gift took. Maybe money, maybe clothing, or food, or something else. But whatever it was, and it doesn't seem to matter because we're not told, this gift was certainly appropriate to Paul's circumstances and therefore helpful and useful. So Paul receives an appropriate, helpful, useful gift while he's under house arrest. But this was not the reason for his joy. He says in verse 10, "I rejoiced in the Lord greatly," upon receiving the gift, all right. But it was not because this gift fulfilled some lack or need, because Paul says that he had learned in whatsoever state he was therewith to be content in Jesus Christ through faith. Not, he says, verse 11, "not that I speak in respect of money." That's not it. Because I'm content. I know both how to cope when I have nothing and when I'm rich. Everywhere and in all things I'm instructed both to be full, to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. He goes further in verse 17 and adds that he didn't even seek a gift from them. "Not because I desire a gift," he writes. And again, it's evident therefore that Paul's joy was not in the gift itself.